You don't lack dreams. You don't lack goals. What you're missing is the ability to make yourself do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. That's self-discipline, the single most important trait that separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck in cycles of delay, regret, and frustration. Discipline doesn't come from a motivational quote or a viral video. It comes from the habits you repeat daily, from the moments you say no to instant pleasure in favor of long-term progress, from the way you show up on slow mornings, tired evenings, and when no one's watching. In this video, we're diving straight into 7 practical and powerful techniques to master self-discipline. No fluff, no perfection needed, just real consistency. If you've ever wondered why you start strong but fall off track, or why your momentum dies after a few days, this is where the pattern breaks. Watch all the way to the end, because techniques 6 and 7 are the most overlooked, yet the most transformative when it comes to sustaining discipline every single day. If anything you hear today could help your future self, a friend, or someone you care about, hit that subscribe button and comment discipline below to commit with me. Let's begin building the strongest version of you, starting now. 1. Begin with small commitments. Self-discipline doesn't begin with a dramatic lifestyle overhaul or superhuman willpower. It begins with one quiet decision. A decision so small, so ordinary that most people overlook its power. I remember my friend Jeff. He was fired up on New Year's Day. Decided he'd wake up at 5 a.m., run 10 miles, read a book a week, cut sugar, and meditate every night. 3 days later, he was back to sleeping in, binge-watching TV, and eating donuts with zero guilt. The problem wasn't Jeff's motivation. It was the size of his commitment. He went too big, too fast, and burned out before discipline had a chance to take root. What most people misunderstand about self-discipline is this. It's not forged in the fire of intensity. It's sculpted in the repetition of tiny, intentional acts. The truth is, mastering self-discipline isn't about pushing harder. It's about starting smaller. When you commit to something realistic, something you can actually follow through on at one, you're not just performing an action, you're also taking a step toward achieving your goals. You're training your mind, you're rewiring your identity. A single glass of water before coffee, a made bed, 3 sentences in a journal. These aren't trivial habits, they're tiny signals that tell your brain, I keep my word to myself. And the more often you keep your word, the more your inner belief strengthens. This isn't about feeling inspired, it's about becoming consistent. Because real progress doesn't come from explosive motivation, it comes from doing the right thing on boring days. Discipline is less about saying yes to big goals and more about saying yes to small, repeatable actions that compound over time. The man who builds strong willpower is not the one who dominates a day. It's the one who repeats his choices quietly, again and again, even when no one's watching. Think of someone who wants to improve their focus. They don't need to cut out every distraction overnight. They could simply start with 5 minutes of deep work, phone off, tabs closed. That small commitment becomes a win, and wins build identity. You become a person who shows up. You become a person who follows through. That internal shift is more powerful than any external motivation. Over time, those 5 minutes turn into 10, then 30, then hours of uninterrupted progress. This is how you rewire your mindset. By giving yourself something small to succeed at, you build emotional momentum. You create a routine of reliability, and that becomes your mental discipline training ground. Each small success reinforces your self-image, making future commitments feel less like a burden and more like a reflection of who you are. But it goes deeper. When you start with small, deliberate commitments, you sidestep the resistance that often sabotages big plans. You eliminate the internal debate. Instead of wondering, do I feel like doing this today? You already know what's coming, and you've proven you can handle it. It no longer feels like a struggle, it becomes automatic. That's how self-discipline transforms from a battle into a rhythm. People often confuse discipline with restriction, but in truth, small commitments are about freedom. When you're no longer fighting yourself, you free up energy to focus, create, and move forward. You stop overthinking and start executing. You stop chasing perfection and start honoring progress. Each small promise kept is a signal of integrity, of self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of lasting discipline. So no, you don't need to change your entire life this Monday. You don't need to run 10 miles or meditate for an hour. You need to make one decision, one micro choice that aligns with your long-term vision. And tomorrow you make it again and again. Because in the end, discipline is not something you force. It's something you construct, brick by brick, choice by choice, moment by moment. This is how you begin, not with pressure, but with precision. Not with intensity, but with consistency. One small commitment at a time. 2. Prioritize what truly matters. Self-discipline is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's easy to confuse being busy with being effective, but there's a massive difference between motion and progress. I once asked my younger brother, "You're working all day, but are you actually moving toward what you truly want?" He went silent. And that silence revealed something many of us are afraid to admit. We're constantly in motion, constantly reacting, constantly checking boxes that don't move us an inch closer to who we want to become. True discipline starts with clarity. Without it, we fall into the trap of urgency, answering every email, responding to every message, cleaning up small messes, while the big priorities stay untouched. The modern world rewards responsiveness, but rarely rewards reflection. That's why so many people spend their entire day in a whirlwind of tasks and still go to bed wondering, what did I actually accomplish? The truth is, without intentional focus, your energy gets diluted across things that feel important but aren't. Real progress requires ruthless prioritization. Choosing your battles, knowing your values, and aligning your time accordingly. Discipline is not about suppressing laziness. It's about strategic energy use. It's choosing which part of the battlefield deserves your full effort. You can be tired at the end of the day and still feel empty if you didn't work on what actually matters. That's why the most disciplined people are often not the busiest, but the clearest. They understand that clarity is power. When you know your goals, your actions become sharper. You stop saying yes to every distraction and start defending your time like it's the most valuable asset you own, because it is. The discipline to prioritize isn't glamorous, but it's life-changing. Imagine this. Someone wakes up, jumps into tasks, runs through meetings, answers messages, and makes calls. At the end of the day, they've been busy every hour, but nothing meaningful got done. That's not a lack of effort. It's a lack of hierarchy. It's the absence of what some call the big rocks. The few essential actions that actually push the needle forward. When you put those in place first, the rest finds its way around them. But if you start with sand, the little tasks, there's no room left for anything else. That's how days disappear. That's how life gets swallowed by the unimportant. Discipline here means learning to say no. No to the tasks that look urgent but lead nowhere. No to the people who drain your focus. No to habits that eat time without a feeding purpose. It's not easy. It requires courage, sometimes discomfort, especially when saying no means disappointing someone else. But every time you protect your priorities, you train your mind to respect your goals. Planning is part of this equation. When you plan your day the night before, you're not just organizing tasks, you're reclaiming control over your future. You enter your day with direction, not reaction. And when you combine that with time blocking, scheduling chunks of focused time for your essential tasks, you remove the guesswork. You stop hoping to find time and start building it on purpose. But even this isn't static. Your priorities must evolve as your life evolves. What mattered 6 months ago might not matter today. So discipline also means reflection. It means checking in with yourself, asking if your time still reflects your values, if your actions still point toward your true goals. And if they don't, it means making hard changes. That's not failure, it's growth. Most people think discipline is about effort, but the deeper truth is, it's about alignment. When your values, your time, and your energy align, you don't have to force discipline. It flows naturally. You no longer have to convince yourself to work on what matters, because what matters becomes the only thing you allow into your day. So, stop chasing busy. Start choosing better. Prioritization is not a productivity hack. It's a discipline mindset. And when mastered, it gives you the one thing no amount of hustle can buy: Meaningful momentum toward the life you truly want. 3. Build habits that run on autopilot. Real discipline doesn't live in constant effort. It lives in what feels effortless, because it's automatic. I once asked a neighbor, a man in his 50s, who always seemed calm, focused, and in better shape than most people half his age, what his secret was. He shrugged and said, "I don't really think about it. I just do what I always do." That's the power of habit. When something becomes part of your identity, you no longer need to force it. You simply live it. The decision has already been made. There's no internal debate, no drain on willpower. You're not trying to act disciplined. You're just being who you are. That's why the strongest form of self-discipline isn't found in the person who makes perfect choices every day. It's found in the person who builds their life around patterns that make good choices automatic. Habits are discipline on autopilot. They remove friction from your life. Instead of asking yourself every morning whether or not to work out, your shoes are already by the door. Instead of wondering whether to read, your book is already next to your coffee. The fewer choices you have to consciously make, the more energy you save for the moments that truly test your focus. Building habits doesn't require intensity. It requires consistency. The biggest mistake people make is trying to change too much at once. They want a total transformation overnight. But discipline doesn't work that way. The brain resists chaos. The nervous system reacts to radical change with shutdown. But when you introduce small, manageable habits, consistently repeated over time, you rewire the brain without creating stress. 5 minutes of stretching, 1 paragraph in a journal, drinking water as soon as you wake. These are not big efforts, but they stack, and stacking is the real secret. By connecting a new habit to an existing one, you create a chain reaction. Brush your teeth, put on your gym clothes, brew your coffee, read 1 page, end your workday, review your to-do list for tomorrow. These simple pairings, known as habit stacking, reduce friction and increase follow-through. More importantly, they build a mental identity. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who finishes what I start. That identity, once solid, will carry you even when motivation fades. But habits don't grow in a vacuum. Environment matters. You cannot build consistent habits in a space filled with chaos, distraction, and temptation. That's why people who seem naturally disciplined often design their surroundings to support their goals. They remove triggers that pull their attention, they limit the options that sabotage progress, and they make the right choices easy. Want to write more? Keep your phone in another room. Want to eat better? Don't stock your kitchen with things that work against you. It's not about willpower. It's about structure. A disciplined person doesn't rely on energy. They rely on systems. There's also something else that fuels habit formation: visibility. When you track your habits, even with a simple check mark, you're giving your brain a visual confirmation of progress. It taps into your need for completion. And over time, that sense of streak, of momentum, becomes a powerful motivator. You don't want to break the chain. You want to keep showing up. You want to protect the identity you've been building. And in doing so, your habits reinforce themselves. What starts as effort becomes rhythm. What starts as resistance becomes default. You stop spending mental energy debating whether or not to do the thing. You just do it because you've done it before. And repetition builds confidence. The longer you stay consistent, the less your mind sees it as optional. At that point, you don't need to push. The habit pulls you. This is how real self-discipline is built, not in dramatic decisions, but in small, quiet rituals repeated daily. You aren't trying to be disciplined for a day or a week. You're building a disciplined identity for life. And the most powerful identity is the one that doesn't need convincing. It acts because that's simply who you are. When habits take over the steering wheel, discipline becomes your natural state, not your struggle. That's how you win, not by force, but by design. 4. Learn to delay gratification. Discipline is the ability to choose what you want most over what you want right now. It's not about punishment. It's not about living a joyless life or constantly denying yourself pleasure. It's about power. The power to pause. Picture this. You open the fridge late at night and there it is, a perfect slice of cake, whispering promises of comfort. But earlier that same day, you looked in the mirror and reminded yourself of your goal, to feel lighter, healthier, and stronger by summer. In that moment, you stand between two desires. One offers temporary pleasure, the other leads to lasting confidence. Discipline begins when you recognize the difference and still choose the harder path. Delaying gratification is not glamorous, but it's the most visible sign of self-control. It separates reactive choices from intentional ones. The people we often admire for their strength or focus aren't saints. They've just trained themselves to stretch the space between impulse and action. They've taught their minds to sit in discomfort a little longer, because they know the short-term thrill isn't worth the long-term cost. This is especially true in moments of emotional vulnerability. When you're bored, tired, frustrated, those are the times your future self is counting on you to hold the line. But this isn't just about food or fitness. It's about the way you handle your time, your money, and your attention. Choosing not to buy something right away, even when it's tempting. Choosing to study or work for another 20 minutes instead of scrolling through your phone. Choosing to have a difficult conversation now rather than letting it explode later. Each time you make that choice, you're strengthening a muscle. And like any muscle, it grows with repetition. One powerful way to build this skill is through visualization. Your mind follows what it focuses on. So when you feel tempted, shift your focus. Instead of obsessing over what you're giving up, imagine what you're building. Don't fixate on the pain of saying no to the donut. Imagine how it will feel to wear that shirt that no longer fits. Don't resent staying in to work on your craft. Picture the pride of mastering it. When the mind sees the reward clearly, the sacrifice feels lighter. That clarity is fuel. It also helps to break big goals into smaller milestones. When gratification is too far off, it feels abstract. But when you see progress, even in small ways, it becomes real. Saving $50 may not be exciting, but doing it every week brings you closer to financial peace. Completing one chapter might not change your life, but finishing 10 will. Discipline feels hard when the reward is invisible. So make progress visible, celebrate it. Let it remind you that the future you want is already being built, one decision at a time. Another technique that works is the delay rule. When you feel a strong emotional urge to do something impulsive, buy, eat, react, tell yourself to wait 10 minutes. That brief pause breaks the pattern. It lets emotions settle. It gives logic room to breathe. Most urges fade when you stop feeding them. And if after 10 minutes the desire is still there, you'll be approaching it with more awareness, not pure emotion. Of course, none of this means it gets easy. The temptation will always exist, but what changes is your relationship with it. You stop seeing discomfort as something to escape and start viewing it as evidence of growth. It becomes a signal that you're choosing to invest in yourself, not betray yourself. That shift alone rewires how you approach discipline. You stop fighting it and start trusting it. Every time you delay gratification, you're casting a vote for your future self. You're protecting your peace, your energy, your progress. You're telling your subconscious, I am someone who can be trusted with hard choices. Over time, that trust compounds. It builds mental resilience. It makes future discipline easier, not harder. The man who can wait, who can sit in the gap between craving and reaction, holds more power than the one who always gets what he wants right now. Because real success doesn't come from how fast you get what you want. It comes from how long you're willing to wait for what truly matters. 5. Create and commit to a routine. Discipline doesn't require brilliance. It requires rhythm. And rhythm is born from routine. A cousin of mine, once in the Navy and now working as an engineer, ends every night the same way. He writes down the 3 most important things he'll do the next day. I don't wake up to figure things out, he told me. I wake up to execute. That single ritual gives his mornings clarity, direction, and momentum. And it's this kind of structured routine, not bursts of motivation, that separates consistent achievers from those who keep starting over. When you commit to a routine, you eliminate 1,000 small choices. You no longer waste energy deciding what to do, when to do it, or whether you feel like it. You step into a schedule you've already designed, one that honors your priorities and protects your energy. In a world full of distractions, where your attention is constantly being pulled in every direction, Having a routine is like building a mental fortress. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you intentional. It reminds you that your time is not a free-for-all. It's a resource you own, and you've chosen how to use it. This kind of self-control doesn't come from discipline alone. It comes from design. When you pre-decide the flow of your day, you give your brain fewer chances to negotiate with laziness. You reduce the friction between intention and action. You start the day with motion already in place. And when that happens, you no longer need to wait for motivation. You don't need to feel ready. You simply follow the plan. That's the beauty of a routine. It liberates you from the trap of hesitation. Consider how often you've wasted time trying to decide whether to work out, check email, or scroll through your phone. Every one of those decisions drains your mental clarity. But when your day already has a clear flow, those moments of doubt disappear. You don't ask, "Should I?" You know what's next. You just do it. And the more you stick to that structure, the more automatic it becomes. That's how a routine turns into identity. You become someone who follows through. Not sometimes, but always. Take your mornings, for example. A clear, intentional morning routine sets the tone for the entire day. It doesn't have to be extreme. What matters is that it aligns with your energy and goals. Whether it's a short walk, a focused journal entry, or a quiet moment with coffee before the noise begins, that first hour shapes your mindset. It sets your focus. It places you in control before the world even begins to pull at you. And when your day ends with equal intention, with a winding down routine that clears your mind and resets your focus for tomorrow, you create a complete loop of discipline. Morning and night become anchors. And in between them, you operate with clarity. Yet structure doesn't mean rigidity. The best routines have space for life. Flexibility is not failure. Some days shift, some interruptions are real. But when the framework is solid, you can bend without breaking. You adjust without losing control. That's what true mental discipline looks like, not obsessing over perfection, but holding steady through the ebb and flow. And within that framework, boundaries become powerful. A disciplined routine includes time where you say no to distractions, to noise, to everyone else's agenda. You create sacred space for deep work, for mental reset, for priorities that often get buried under chaos. This isn't about being antisocial or robotic. It's about being selective with your time. You no longer live reactively. You live with direction. Eventually, your routine stops being a schedule. It becomes a system, a quiet engine that carries you forward, even on the days you don't feel strong. You no longer rely on willpower. The structure itself keeps you moving. And over time, that movement becomes identity. That identity shapes everything else: your focus, your consistency, your success. Discipline is rarely about effort in the moment. It's about the effort you put in ahead of time to make the moment easier. And there's no greater tool for that than a well-designed routine. When you commit to it, not perfectly, but persistently, you give yourself the clearest path to lasting results. Not because you're forcing yourself every day, but because you've created a system where success becomes the default. That's not a restriction, that's real freedom. 6. Embrace discomfort as a teacher. Discipline does not thrive in comfort, it grows in friction. I once joined a friend for a boxing class. 10 minutes in, drenched in sweat, lungs burning, legs trembling, I wanted to quit. But my friend looked at me and said, "That feeling right there, that's what I train for." He wasn't trying to become a champion fighter. He was training not to walk away from hard things in life. That single sentence changed how I saw discomfort. It stopped being an enemy. It became a teacher. The truth is, self-discipline only matures when you consistently step outside what feels easy. It's easy to focus when you're rested. It's easy to speak when everyone agrees. It's easy to act when you feel inspired. But those are not the moments that shape you. Growth lives where friction exists. Every time you push through a task that drains you, stay silent when you want to react, or complete something you wanted to avoid, you're training a muscle more powerful than any in your body, your inner strength. And that strength becomes the quiet foundation of everything you build. Discomfort is not there to punish you, it's there to sharpen you. Most people avoid it like a virus, mistaking temporary struggle for permanent failure. But discomfort is a signal. It tells you you're doing something different, something difficult, something worth the effort. When you learn to read that signal correctly, you realize it's not something to escape, it's something to enter. Because within it lies the very transformation you've been chasing. Every act of self-discipline has discomfort wrapped inside. Writing that tough email, saying no to a client request, speaking up in a room where silence is easier, beginning work even when you feel completely unprepared. These are not glamorous actions, but they build the kind of man who doesn't crumble under pressure, the kind who shows up not just when it's convenient, but when it's necessary. That is the man who earns the results others admire but rarely understand. The way to build this mindset is simple but not easy. You deliberately choose discomfort in small ways. You take the stairs when you're tempted by the elevator. You turn your phone off for an hour to actually think. You push one more rep when your body says stop. These aren't huge achievements, but they're daily reminders that you are not run by your impulses. You are training control, and that control compounds. Discomfort also has a voice, a quiet, biting one. It says, "You're not ready. You can't do this. You'll fail." Most people listen, but disciplined people reply. They remind themselves of their why. They reframe the pain as proof of progress. They remind themselves that the voice of doubt gets quieter the more they take action. And they take action anyway. Because the fear of discomfort is almost always worse than the discomfort itself. One technique that sharpens this is reflection. After every uncomfortable act, write down how you felt before and after. Often you'll find that what felt overwhelming turned into relief. What started as resistance ended in clarity. This memory becomes a tool. The next time you hesitate, you'll remember, not imagine, what it feels like to win that internal battle. And that memory helps you push through again. In a world that worships ease, choosing discomfort is a quiet rebellion. It's a personal declaration that you are willing to do what most won't, that you'll endure challenges in order to expand. And what's on the other side of that choice is not just progress, it's power. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that stands. Steady, grounded, unshakable. Discomfort doesn't last, but the character it forges does. It teaches you to hold steady in chaos, to choose logic over emotion, to stand your ground when everything inside you wants to flee. Every time you lean into it, you're not backing down, you're leveling up. And over time, those hard choices define you more than any talent ever could. That is the reward only discipline can earn. That is the strength only discomfort can teach. 7. Reconnect with your why. Regularly. Discipline fades when your reason disappears. You may start strong, full of fire, fueled by a goal or vision, but when the routine becomes exhausting and life gets in the way, only one thing keeps you going: your why. I once asked a man who had lost over 40 pounds for health reasons what kept him from giving up on the days he felt drained and unmotivated. He didn't mention willpower or routine. He simply said, "I picture my daughter walking down the aisle and I want to be there, not watching from a hospital bed, walking by her side." That's not a workout plan. That's a reason. And that reason is stronger than any excuse. Motivation comes and goes. That's the nature of emotion. You feel powerful on Monday, but defeated by Thursday. That's not weakness. It's human. The problem arises when you rely on motivation to sustain your discipline. Because when the emotional high fades, so does your effort. What carries you forward in those low moments is clarity. Clarity of purpose. You don't need constant motivation if your reason is rooted deep enough. When your why is clear, your how becomes automatic. You stop chasing energy and start following direction. But that clarity needs to be renewed. Most people lose discipline not because they're lazy, but because they forget. They forget why they started. They forget what's at stake. They forget the feeling of being tired of their old self. That's why one of the most powerful mental discipline techniques is reconnecting with your why regularly. You don't do it once at the start of the year. You do it weekly, sometimes daily, because the world will keep distracting you and your mind will keep doubting you unless you remind it. In everyday life, your why is often hidden behind the action. You don't go to the gym just to look better. You go because you remember the lower back pain you swore you'd never feel again. You don't save money just for numbers on a screen. You do it because you want to take your parents on that trip before time runs out. You don't stay up learning a new skill just to get ahead. You do it because the version of you 5 years ago was stuck, scared, and desperate for the life you're now building. When you act from that place, discipline stops feeling forced. It feels necessary. But clarity doesn't survive in silence. It must be seen. It must be repeated. So write down the question, why am I doing this? And answer it often. Put that answer somewhere visible, on your bathroom mirror, your phone background, your notebook, your wall. Let it interrupt your excuses. Let it speak when your emotions want to quit. Sometimes a single word is enough. Freedom, family, legacy. When discipline feels hard, that word becomes your anchor. The more personal your why, the more powerful your discipline. And when you make that why visible, your environment becomes your ally. A photo, a note, a quote, they're not decorations, they're triggers. They remind your subconscious that this moment, this sacrifice, this choice, it matters. And when you feel disconnected, you don't need to force effort. You need to reconnect with meaning. Meaning always breathes life back into discipline. Discipline is the vessel. Your why is the compass. Without the compass, the vessel drifts. It loses direction. It moves, but it doesn't progress. It's why so many people burn out even when they're consistent. They forgot what they were rowing toward. But when the direction is clear, even choppy water won't stop you. You don't waste time asking, should I keep going? You already know the answer. Because you're not just working hard, you're moving with intention. The strongest people aren't the ones who never get tired. They're the ones who never lose sight of their why. That's what gives weight to their actions. That's what transforms temporary struggle into long-term commitment. Reconnecting with your reason is not a soft reminder. It's a strategic reset. And every time you do it, you give your discipline something stronger than motivation to stand on. You give it purpose. Self-discipline isn't built in a single day. It's earned one small decision at a time. From choosing habits that rewire your mindset to delaying gratification, setting a clear routine, and facing discomfort with quiet strength, each technique stacks toward a stronger version of you. But none of it lasts if you forget your why. That's your anchor when motivation fades. When you reconnect with your purpose, you stop reacting and start leading your life with intention. Whether you're trying to break bad mental patterns, build a calm mindset, or create a daily discipline routine, the tools are already in your hands. You don't need perfection. You need presence. You need clarity. And you need the courage to start where you are. Now it's your turn. What's one habit, one mindset shift, or one challenge you faced on your journey toward mastering self-discipline? Share your story in the comments below. Let's grow together, one deliberate step at a time. If this video helped you reset your thinking, don't forget to like it and subscribe for more practical insights on how to build inner strength, protect your focus, and live with unshakable intention.